What's up, guys? It's the Wisdom of Coaches podcast, hosted by the Legacy Track Club. It's Coach Rabo here with Coach Falting. How you doing today, Coach Falting?
Living the dream.
That's right.
All day, every day.
Yep. Another day in paradise. Today we have a great podcast for you. We want to talk about something that is probably present on the mind of a lot of coaches and athletes, and that is summer training. So with Legacy Track Club, we work with a variety of athletes, but a large amount of them kind of fall into two camps. And one of those camps are high school athletes and teams. So we work with individual athletes as well as with high school teams. And the other one being a lot of marathon runners. And both of these groups are really going to be getting kicked off here in the next week or so with summer training. So if you're a cross-country team, you're getting ready for the cross-country season that will be starting up in about September. If you're a marathoner, getting ready for some of those fall and winter marathons. And summer training is really a very important part of this. It's really going to build and set the foundation for what your season is going to be built on. So we're going to chat today a little bit about how to get the most out of your summer training, some of the things that Coach Falting uses in his own program, and the ways that we can translate that to you so that you can make your yourself or your athletes better and put them in a great position for a great season. So you ready to get this kicked off, Coach Falting?
Yeah, I think so. I kind of just made a list of things that I think are important. And I think some of these things are things that people consider all the time, and others are things that people may neglect or may be misinformed about. So I want to start with probably the most important thing out there, which is as exciting as it is for people to get into their summer training, and a lot of the volume and the things you do in the summer really kind of build, the gas tank and the engine for the year of competition. You need to make sure you're 100% healthy before you get into this. Okay. So if you've still got like a little bit of a nagging, pain somewhere in your hips or your ankle or your knee, like you need to rest. Okay. Because ultimately the number one way to create a great long distance runner is long-term consistent training. And so, if you've got to sit out a couple of extra days to get started, so maybe you don't get the full 80 days in this summer. Maybe you only, get 70 days in this summer. 70 days of consistent training is significantly better than 80 days of training where I'm taking off, every fifth to seventh day to kind of recover from some kind of pain that is growing. And so before we even, discuss like what training should look like, I think that's the first and most important step is making sure, hey man, you got to be healthy. It's a long, long year of competition. We don't need to speed up that process by going into it injured.
Yeah, absolutely. Athletes coming off of their track season or coming off of a spring racing calendar, going to be a lot beat up athletes out there. There's going to be some some twinges here and there, some muscles that are sore, some ligaments. Almost said ligaments, tendons and ligaments that are tight and sore and may need some attention. And I think this is a great call out. Like you said, consistency is king. It's one of the biggest things. Giving an athlete an extra week or two to heal up and come back strong and ready to go is going to do so much more than, kicking it off and just being like, they'll be okay. And then, you lose a couple of days in June, and then July, you lose a few more days. And then August, that thing really flares up. And then you lose a month. And so now their season's kind of in jeopardy. So, I had a real wise racer tell me one time, you want to, whatever you do, make sure you get to the start line healthy. Otherwise, all the training is just kind of pointless. And I think that really plays into the part here. We need to get to the start line healthy, and we want to get there by starting off our season healthy. So 100% couldn't agree with you more. I think that's such an important part for these athletes coming off a tough track season or a tough spring racing calendar.
Yeah. And then, almost contradictory to this, but not, again, if you're not healthy, take as long as you need and stuff. But I think another myth that people have sometimes is, I just got done racing, I've been running for X number of weeks competitively. Now it's time for this huge break. And in my mind, there's a shift that kind of needs to be made there. Okay. If I spent the last 40 weeks building up great fitness and lowering all my times and paces, I don't really want to start back over like from jump again. One of the things I like to tell our athletes is, if we could start, racing where we finished racing the year before, we're probably in a good spot. So if a kid was a 5-minute miler and they worked down to a 4:30 miler, I don't want to come back a year from now and start off at a 5-minute mile again and work them back to 4:30. I want to start at 4:30 and work them up to something else, And so I think that the way to do that is not to just go, completely cold turkey from running if you're healthy. But, if you just finished your state meet in track, you just finished, a big marathon, you need to take a week off, just completely off, let the body recover. Even if you want to run, don't talk yourself out of it. Go do something else. And then that next week, I have my athletes run every other day for about 30 minutes at the training pace that they were doing their regular runs at before we finished the season. And so to me, that's a really, really big deal. Training pace is a big kind of measurable that we look at in our program. If your regular running days, you've been running 7-minute pace, and throughout the year you work it down to 6:30 pace, and you feel the same as you did at 7 minutes, then all these other times are going to drop as well. You're going to get faster for, cross country. You're going to get faster for the mile and the 2 mile. And so we want to keep that pace that they've kind of been building, like still in their bodies. So we do every other day, 30 minutes at around that pace, probably taking the week off to be a little bit off of it. We come back the next week and we try to do 5 days at that pace. And then we get into our actual base training and what it's going to look like and stuff. So, those people that took, a month off, I just feel like you're losing a whole lot of fitness that you worked so hard to build, and stuff. So if you're not injured, don't take that kind of break. If you are injured, again, long-term consistent training is more important than even those days of fitness, but I think that's the next thing that people need to be aware of.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the mental aspect as well as the physical aspect, if you're feeling healthy, if you're feeling good, I agree 100%. Take a week off, even if you're wanting to run, just mentally, it's going to help you reset. It's going to help you be ready to go when it's time to train again. I know whenever I finish up a race with the running streak, I don't have the luxury of taking a complete day off, but, I'll go out and do my mile each day after that. And it's good to just not have structured training. Structured training is difficult over time. It's something that, requires a lot of your attention and a lot of your physicality that you're putting towards that. And so just being able to take some time to not think about running, to just kind of enjoy doing other things. And then, like you said, a week later, just some fun, unstructured running, getting to go out with teammates if you're running in high school, or getting to go out with, some training partners that you may not get to run with quite as often if you're marathon training and you're, running different paces from individuals. And just having fun, you're not going out with every run doesn't have a purpose that's set in stone that you're going to have for your training plan. I don't have to worry about going out and hitting a tempo pace for, 30 minutes or whatever. I can just go out and kind of goof off and talk and just get back to enjoying running. And I think that's such an important reset for the body as well as the mind, because, you can get so burned out when you're just training hard for extended periods of time. And it's a great reset and allows you to get back to doing and realizing why you're doing it in the first place, because you love it. It's something that you just enjoy doing in the grand scheme of things.
I really like the people that, during the break, like all of a sudden want to run, and so they're messaging me like, Coach, can I please go run today? It's like, I miss it. Like, no, like we're still in that phase, but it's a great sign if you miss it, because that means it's something that you really love. That you want to get back to it. And I think, when it's time to get back to it, you'll approach it with the right mindset. So I'm a huge fan of that, And so, going over those two things to start off with, okay, now we're going to actually start the base building. I think the biggest mistake people make here is that they think that base building is just miles.
Oh, absolutely.
Long, slow distance, is what a lot of people call it. As long as you're getting in, these miles at whatever pace, you're going to be successful. And that's just not what science tells us. It's not what the human body tells us. I love these coaches that, tell me in October, like, all right, now, the state meet's a month away. Now it's time to put on the speed, so we're going to start, doing some fast things with these kids, and normally the byproduct of that is you get some really, really tired kids at the end when they get there. And so, how do you combat that? What's the right way to train? You got to do multi-pace training all the time. And, the doses change a lot depending on the season, but I think in cross-country season when you're base building, you've got to do some really fast stuff. you got to do really small doses of it, but after we get done getting some mileage in cross country, it's okay to do, 4 by, 40 meter all out sprints, or 5 by 100-meter strides at 800-meter pace, and just sprinkle those things in. And maybe, when you get to track season, you're looking at doing a little bit of a higher volume of that. Maybe you're lowering your mileage a little bit and ramping up the speed some. But I think you need to go ahead and put that in, because at the end of the day, if my kids do, 40 meters times 4, so that's 160 meters of all-out sprinting, feeling fresh and recovered, because we're just walking back to the starting line each time. If we do that for all of cross-country season from June all the way through November, they've done hundreds of miles of all-out sprinting, completely recovered. It hasn't taken a toll on the body. And from a neuromuscular standpoint, they've trained their bodies to be able to run fast. I don't think you can duplicate that by waiting till October to be like, now we're going to go run fast. One, you can't get that volume of miles in at that speed. And two, the adaptation period is shrunk tremendously. So yeah, I think you need to, incorporate that. I think you need to incorporate, small doses of race pace. All right. Your training is going to be, for a cross country meet, it's probably going to be around marathon pace. A lot of your regular runs are going to be and stuff, but you need to do some things at 10K pace. You need to do some things at 5K pace. You need to sprinkle a little bit of stuff at 2-mile pace, and I think you blend that in throughout your training, throughout a training cycle. And again, when you look up at the end of cross country season, you've done some stuff at race pace in a large volume, in an easy way. You've done some stuff faster than race pace. You've done some stuff at sprint pace, and you've done some stuff that's really highly aerobic to help build the body. And I just think that there's no substitute or no way to do that process where you can get the sheer volume of all those pieces without sprinkling it in routinely from the very beginning. And so I think that's what base building should look like.
Yeah, 100% agree. I think there's so many positives to what you just said. I think the old model of this was very much, hey, we're going to spend all summer doing LSD, long, slow distance. We're going to get you guys a good base in, just a lot of easy runs, maybe a long run on the weekends. All right, and then early cross-country season hits, and the long run gets cut because we're going to races, and we're doing some mile repeats and maybe some tempos. And as we get closer to the end of the season, just like you said, now it's time to add the speed. We're doing, 400-meter repeats, and that's just, it's the equivalent of, a football coach writing 3x10 lifts on the board. It's just something that's tired, it's dated, and if you're still doing it, you're just not doing right by your athletes. And so there's just so many positives to hitting all these different things. Like you said, over time you're just building this up. We're talking, you're having them sprint early on, you're developing, the muscular system, you're developing the skeletal system, you're developing the nervous system. Just like the shock that your body goes through. If you were to go out right now after not sprinting for months and try to sprint, it's not just a shock to your muscles, it's a shock to your nerves. They like the firing of, they just have no idea what's going on. And so if you're waiting until late in the season to do this, you're like you said, you're not giving your body the time to make the adaptations that it need. B, if you haven't practiced sprinting for the entirety of cross country season, and all of a sudden late in the season you're having kids run hard all out 200s, you're asking for somebody to pull a hamstring, especially if you're throwing it in, at the end of a high mileage week where they're already tired and they're already fatigued. So I just see so many positives of this, hitting different paces, mile pace, 2-mile pace, 5K pace, 10K pace. It gives the athletes a greater sense of the pace, even more so than like, hey, we're going to run, 4 by mile at 3-mile pace. Sure, that's going to give them a good idea of this, but if you're constantly hitting these paces all the time, an athlete's going to go, this is mile pace, this is what this feels like, this is 2-mile pace, this is what this feels like. And they're going to know in a race situation, oh, I'm going out, this feels a lot like 2-mile pace, and I'm in a 5K race. I probably need to back off just a little bit so that I can, not blow up at the 2-mile mark of this race. So absolutely, I think that's just should be how it's going now. And I think that's for 5K runners. I think that's for marathoners. I go out as a marathon or ultra marathoner. I do strides almost every single week. I'm touching on mile pace. I'm touching on marathon pace and everything in between. And I think it makes you a more well-rounded runner, a more injury-resistant runner. And it's a lot more fun having a variety of paces than it is just going out and like, all right, I'm running 5K pace every single workout, every single week. So 100% couldn't agree more. Sprinkling this stuff in, hey, we're going to do an 8-mile run, and then you guys are going to do a couple of 400s at 2-mile pace. It spices it up, right? It's not just, oh, well, we're going to go out and run training pace at 5 days this week. All right, well, see you guys later. See you next week. Like, it's exciting. It gives them that little pop of speed. It gets them feeling good, and it's creating incredible runners in the process.
Right. And that leads me, to my next point, because I do agree. I think monotony is a little torturous to the soul, especially when you're working with like teenagers and stuff, or some of these marathoners we coach are, by themselves somewhere in the country training and stuff. And so monotony is going to let a lot of, things creep in and stuff, so you do want to, provide a lot of different opportunities for things. You want to keep it fun. I would say my next thing for summer training is you don't want to make it too exciting. Okay. And by too exciting, summer is a time away from competition. All right. And some people struggle with that idea that, you're not really competing as much. So you don't need to create a scenario in training where you're going to have to go like super deep into the well and challenge yourself like that. Okay. That's not part of what needs to take place. So when you see these videos of these people that are having these practices in the summer and their kids are just like laid out in the grass after they've done, really, really hard 800-meter repeats or something like that. It's like, okay, well, that's not really what the purpose of the summer is for. Okay. That's working something a lot different. You're making your kids go tremendously lactic, during those things. You don't need to do that. The whole idea of the summer is to build a really huge aerobic base, all right, while revving the engine a little bit. Those days of training and going, very lactic at the end of workouts and stuff, well, now you're not really training the aerobic system very much in that. In fact, you're challenging the aerobic system. It's the reason that you're, breaking down and developing lactic acid. There's a time and a place for that type of training, and you're going to need some exposure to that as you go through, competition throughout, cross country, indoor and outdoor track. But in the summer, you can leave that aside. You don't need that at that point. Okay? You don't need kids, having to recover for extra days because you just beat them up so much. My motto in the summer is be able to walk away from every practice. No matter what you do, no matter how hard it is, it needs to be something that you can walk away from. You can wake up the next morning and still feel excited to run. I did the Murph yesterday for the first time. I did an annotated Murph. But I did do 100 reps of pulling, 200 reps of pushing, and 300 reps of squatting. And I can tell you that today I don't want to work out. So, and tomorrow, when the, delayed, muscle soreness sets in even more, I can tell you I'm not going to want to work out. And so you don't want that in the summer. You don't want to lose training because of something like that. Because again, if long-term consistent training makes a great athlete, don't put yourself or your athletes in a situation where they need long-term recovery in the summer. They're going to lose out on that consistent training at a time when they're the least stressed in their lives. There's no school going on. There's not a lot of stress. They're working. It's a part-time job. Allow them to recover properly and train properly to utilize, the time we have in the summer.
Especially in the day we live in, the social media age, we get probably more access to athletes and runners and workouts and things than we've ever had. And we still don't have a ton because people are very protective of what they're prescribing their athletes. But it's very easy to see, and it makes for good viewing, these crazy workouts where, like you're saying, people are just laid out afterwards or people are throwing up. And it kind of glorifies like that hard work mentality. And yeah, hard work's great, but like you're saying, there's no reason to go out, go to the well, break an athlete down to the point where like the next day they're having trouble running. Honestly, you're actually going to be losing some fitness in the grand scheme that you're not building that up. And you do that too often in the summer, and I've been guilty of this myself in times where I'm doing 2 hard workouts a week and then a long run, and just really like putting myself in a depth that like I'm not able to sustain that. And especially in summer, you want things that you're able to sustain long term. So being able to walk away from workout is so incredibly important. I did workout the other day, and I'm sitting here talking about being, just like, oh, these hard workouts, and I like named it death by mile repeats on Strava because you got to have a great Strava title, right? But I went up to Woodland Park, which is at like 8,400 feet, getting ready for Leadville, which is at 10,000 feet. And so it's kind of a marathon workout, just kind of getting some improved efficiency at faster paces, which will help me with my ultra marathons. And was originally planning 18 miles, 15-mile repeats on the track with a quarter-mile recovery. And I figured I was going to be 7:15 pace because of the altitude, but I was knocking most of these out low 650, so 655 or so, a little bit under, and I was feeling really good, and my body's been kind of beat up the last few weeks. I've been putting in some 65-mile weeks, and I got to like 8, and I was just kind of like, I think I might just like not stop this at 10, and then instead of doing, or I was going to do 12 repeats, not 15. It's like maybe I'll just stop this at 10. Like, I'm feeling good. I'm still hitting these. I'm not going to the well. I'll probably have to go to the well a little bit to get to 12. And so, I did my last 2, finished the last one at 6:44, and I stopped the workout. And I was like, I got exactly out of this workout what I wanted to get out of this workout without having to go to the well. Could I have finished those last 2 reps? Sure. Would I have gotten a slight bump in fitness from the workout if I had done those last 2 reps? Probably a small bump in fitness. Would my injury potential have skyrocketed over those last 2 reps when I was running on really tired legs? Yes. So that to me is like one of the big things is, like you're saying, stop when you can, I think a lot of people, they just want to like keep putting it in, and it's like every single run is kind of like if you could probably keep going over and over and over again, but that risk of injury just keeps rising exponentially the more you're running on tired legs, especially if you're doing a hard workout on tired legs. And there's a time and a place for it, but to me, you spend all summer building those muscles, building that skeletal system, getting it ready for some of those hard workouts a little bit later on so that you're more prepped for them, you're more ready for them, and you're more ready to reap the benefits of that as opposed to just breaking yourself down in the name of having a hard workout that's going to, kill the kids. Those coaches, they're like, oh, get ready today. This one's going to be a bruiser. You guys, I'm not stopping until everyone's puked on the side of the track. Like, it makes for a great video. It's not necessarily the greatest thing for your athlete's training.
Well, and you also, when that happens, you get these coaches that in July are like, oh my God, this kid, is running, a 9:30 2-mile, and stuff like, and then you get to cross country season and it's like they're running 16:20 for 3 miles. So it's like, what did I miss here?
Yeah. They don't run 9:30 again the rest of that year at all.
Right. And it's because, you trained them in the summer like it was the end of track season. Yeah. So they got really, really fast. And then they had nothing to carry that over into the long cross country season in terms of aerobic fitness and stuff. So, almost like tapered them basically by doing it the way that you did it and stuff. And so, I think that there's a way. I think, you also need to prepare your kids. Like, the goal is what you run at the end of the year, not at the beginning of the year and stuff. So it's okay if in the summer you're not PRing at events while you're training more aerobically.
Yeah.
But again, I'm a firm believer if we lower that training pace and you sprinkle in, a lot of those different, speeds, like a lower training pace that feels the same as it did before is going to increase your fitness. It's going to lower your mile time. It's going to lower your cross country time and stuff. I can just tell you, like, if there was a world out there where a high school kid, through great training could run 5-minute pace the same way they felt when they ran 8-minute pace, when they were in middle school, that kid's about to destroy everybody in events and stuff because, they're tremendously aerobically fit.
Yeah.
And so you're going to see some big things out of that stuff. And so, and again, that comes from not going to the well very often. Okay. Yeah. One of the greatest things that COVID taught us was in the distance community. When people couldn't race, they got a whole heck of a lot faster,
Yeah.
So we need to view every summer like that. Like that's a time where you don't have to race. You don't have to check a box. You don't have to go race it against the teams and the meets that you are required to race in all the time. Like even these athletes that we coach, that aren't our own, they're still kind of governed by like, well, my school wants to go race at this race, or, I've got this qualifying meet I have to go run at, and so the fact that the summer alleviates that, people need to appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean, the 5K is something like it's over 90% aerobic. I even think the mile is something like 90% aerobic, and so really the speed stuff, it's just icing on the cake. It's not the entire cake. Like if you're not developing that aerobic engine, then you're leaving off 90% of what you could be doing in a 5K. I mean, the speed is important, absolutely, and we want to be working that in, but developing that aerobic engine is going to improve your 5K time, your mile time, and everything up from there. So super important, and don't get caught up in all the fluff and the the window dressing when really it's just the tried and true, like getting out there, running consistently at a good pace over and over again with the other stuff sprinkled in.
Yeah, I love a great cross country kick. But what's laughable is when you watch the kids at the end of a race that have been kind of jogging and walking the course, and then they kick at the end. Like that's an irrelevant kick. But watching those kids that make it to the end, that are fighting to help win their team a title or those kind of things, or fighting to be on the all district team or all state team or those things, that kick's exciting. And yeah, you've got to rev the engine to prepare for that kick. You don't, blow out a hamstring in a cross country race because you've never attempted to kick before. But if you can't get within 50, 100 meters of the finish line in a good spot, the kick's kind of irrelevant at that point, right? Like and so understanding that you got to do both those things, but measuring how you do both those things. The majority of our time needs to be aerobic development, to get you to within 50 meters of the finish line.
Well, I mean, speaking of an aerobic kick, I don't know if you saw yesterday was the Boulder, which is one of the largest 10Ks in the United States. It's in Boulder, Colorado, and I've done it a couple of times. Very great racing. It's all the amateurs go first, and at the end, when everyone's in Folsom Stadium, which is where the Colorado Buffaloes play, they let the pros race. And so Connor Mance runs for Nike, I believe. He's a former BYU athlete coached by Ed Eyestone. Very, probably the American marathoner of the moment. I mean, it was fourth in Boston. Is kind of the face of American distance running at the moment, especially for higher distances. He had won the Boulder the previous 2 years. So this year, and you can go look this up, Connor Mance, kick at the 2025 Boulder. Have you seen this video yet, Falting?
No.
So going in with a mile left, Connor Mance is 10 seconds behind first place in a 10K. So this is not a guy who's probably traditionally trained for, I mean, he's a marathon specialist, so I guarantee you he's not going out and running 400s as hard as he freaking can. With a mile left, 10 seconds behind, he closes it down, and the guy in first place, they said he was a silver medalist, I'm assuming in the 10K, and Connor Mance kicks him down, passes him with about 50 meters left, and then goes on to win this thing in like 28:50 or something like that. And so you're talking about a guy that's just supremely aerobically fit, but still has the wheels at the end, and he's getting that not from going out and doing hard repeats until he's puking in the grass. He's getting that from doing large volume mileage that he's built up and he's accustomed to, and doing a variety of different paces, and doing some strength workout stuff that their coach has them going through. So.
Right. So, well, and that's a good segue for my final, point for this summer training. You've coached with me for a long time now, both as my assistant and then in this capacity with the Legacy Track Club. And I like to experiment. It's a really big deal for me. I think I want to be a lifelong learner. I don't want to, just say, hey, this is the workouts that worked for us 2 years ago. Let's just keep using them. And so I'm constantly reading things. And so my newest fascination is I've been reading a book called Ballistic, and it's about kind of reducing the injuries in athletes. And it looks at the idea of like ballistic propulsion, like launching, a missile into the air. It takes a certain amount of force to launch it. And then that missile is going to, hit the ground with a tremendous amount of force as well. And so when you think about the idea of, training distance runners and other athletes, the act of applying a lot of force, like pushing off with a lot of force, is going to make you run faster. You're going to cover more ground. And yet what we don't want to do is have you impact the ground with a tremendous amount of force, So it'd be nice to push off with a force that's 10 times my body weight, but not land with a force that's 10 times my body weight. And so this book looks at the idea of how to increase force production, and then how to get kids to land in such a way, that they're minimizing the impact that they're having, with the ground. Like a lot of distance runners you see are just like heel toe all the time, and you got to think, the amount of force that you're generating that heel sometimes hitting the ground is where these kids are getting shin splints and some of these pains from and stuff. And so, in order to do this, you've got to implement a lot of things that people used to think were taboo. If you're running, if your kids are running a ton of miles, then the idea is like, I don't really want to have their feet hit the ground any more than they have to. And yet the reality is training them on how their feet can hit the ground and how to generate forces is something that needs to be added in there. You've got to look at your program as something now where you incorporate jumps. Last year we did some box jumps, we did some depth jumps. We do a lot of jump roping because it works with a lot of the little muscles in your feet, the ligaments, teaches people how to land correctly and stuff. But, looking at these studies in this book, it's something that we're going to incorporate a lot more of this year is trying to figure out how to get kids to generate a tremendous amount of force to increase speed, and yet be able to land in such a way that they're not taking the brunt of that force and stuff. So I'm really excited. I've got like a jump routine planned. We start practice next week. And again, we'll do it in small doses, because they're getting a lot of leg work. They're getting, a lot of running. They're going to run over hills, and we do strength training and stuff. But I think this is something that could be valuable to our program and valuable to anybody's program if you do it right.
Yeah, absolutely. Plyometrics is one of those things that, I feel like you always knew you should have been doing, but you never were actually doing. And now that I am doing it with some regularity, I'm like, why was I not doing this for the past 5 years, 10 years, however long? Numerous things that I've been reading up, just like you said, lifelong learner. Like I'm constantly reading stuff about training, running. I'm kind of like my own little experiment of one when it comes to some of my own training and stuff like that. But there was a study where they took a control group and then they took their study group, and so the only thing they changed was they had one group do dead drops. And so this is essentially you're standing on the platform, box, curve, whatever. You step off and you land both feet at the same time and you immediately pop up, jump up, And so they had one group do this, I think it was 6 to 8 weeks, something like that. And that was the only difference, and their 5K times increased, I want to say 6%, something. It was a marked increase in the 5K times just from doing these dead drops. And so, I've implemented those in. Box jumps, like you said, I've been doing some kind of like step-ups, but explosive step-ups. The thing about plyometrics is, if you're lifting weights, you're developing strength, and strength is great. Plyometrics develop power, and power is how you're able to utilize that strength. Are you able to move that in, a fashion that's quick and that's going to generate force, like you're saying, so that you're able to push off and you're able to get an extra inch or two per stride. And if you're talking about an extra inch or two per stride, then you're talking about somebody who is running with the same, same force they were, and they're going to be feet, meters, 100 meters ahead of where they were, just because they're able to produce more force. This is something. There's a great podcast where I can't remember the guy's name for the life of me, but he was called the Savant of Speed. He worked with Nike. I think you and I have both listened to this, but he had Mo Farah was one of the athletes not Mo Farah, excuse me, Meb. He was working with Meb before Meb Boston win, and he was having them do hex lift with the hex bar deadlift. And he was, like, hey, if I can get this guy stronger without, putting any weight on him, then he's going to be able to, take a few extra inches off on each stride. And at the end of it, he was like, this guy's going to run a mile less, like stepwise, by the end of the marathon. And that was the year that Meb went on and won Boston. And I think a lot of that probably comes back to it. And plyometrics is one of those things. I mean, it's great for force generation. It's great for injury prevention and things like that as well. I've done this whenever I was having some knee issues, dropping off a bench and landing, kind of teaching my body how to land correctly, dropping down into a squat. So there's just a lot to be, said here. Really and truly look up stuff, go to coaching clinics, read articles, because like you're saying, these things, read books, because these things will give you useful information that we've implemented. I know you've done this numerous times, from implementing Allison Felix's kind of strength routine into the program, and you saw that helping basketball, track, cross country, and some of these things that, like, football coaches are walking in going, what the heck are you guys doing? And it's like, we're taking kids that, weigh 110 pounds and are deadlifting, 185 pounds, and they're getting faster doing it. So absolutely, I applaud your curiosity and just the willingness to go out and try something new and not just sit with the status quo every single time, because that's what's worked in the past.
And again, like, I was not a distance runner or a distance coach by trade. And the way I got into this was I filled in for somebody that was on medical leave, and they sent me training plans for me to follow. And I followed those. And my first year coaching, the girls got second in the state with me just following this plan. And at that time, I thought, okay, this is just a recipe that you follow. And what I quickly learned over the next couple of years was that that's not true. There is no just recipe that here you go. This is, if you do this, you're going to be a winner. Because if there was, everybody would do it. You've got different athletes coming in that you're training that need different things to take place. You've got different personalities. You've got other teams training differently that you're going to be competing against. And so, yeah, you've got to keep adapting. And I think the only way to adapt is to keep, studying and learning. And then I'm a firm believer of not just tossing everything out that has been working, and starting over with a brand new plan. I don't think that's the right way to do stuff. But taking things and seeing, all right, how can I take this study and apply it in a small dose to my team to help move the needle where they can adjust to it. And see if we can get some success from that. A big deal to me is I want athletes to come back to my program 10 years from now and it look totally different than when they were here, but the concept still be the same. They still feel like it's their team they were a part of, but the training looks different because over those 10 years, we made small adjustments year after year after year that when you look up now, it's completely different. And so athletes, I think, see that all the time. We have athletes come and visit. They're like, Coach, when did we do this? It's like, well, we didn't. We didn't do anything like this back in the day. But let me tell you why we do it now. And I laugh all the time. There's a former athlete, little group text that I'm in. And when they see one of our kids, break one of their records, like, oh my God, what are you feeding these kids, coach? Or like, we'd have been just as fast if you'd have trained us this way back in the day. And it's like, well, no, y'all might not have. Y'all might have quit if we'd have trained like this back in the day. Like, this was slow changes, to move something in a positive way that take time, and stuff. And so yeah, please don't, pick up the next running book you see and just take the plan and start doing it. I promise you'll not have the results you're looking for. But take the time and be an experimenter and a lifelong learner, and I think you'll see some great things.
Yeah. Absolutely. That's a big thing. Coaching, I always say coaching is part art and it's part science, and you got to have a little bit of both. And the science part that you're saying, it's not a recipe that you can follow. It's not just like, all right, well, take these kids and do this mileage and do these workouts, and you're gonna have a bunch of state champs. Because, like you say, every single year, it's going to be different. You're going to have different kids. You're going to have different athletes. You're going to have different motivations. You're going to have to figure out, do I motivate these kids intrinsically or extrinsically? And that's where the art comes in, and figuring out like, all right, when can I push this, and do I need to back off and figure these things out? And I think that's something that you have been able to handle very well. And as someone who was there at the program 10 years ago coaching with you, I will vouch for the fact that it does look very different, but those core principles still hold true. And at the end of the day, I think the biggest thing for any coach, and I think this is something you might well, is you're training athletes, but at the same time, you're I won't say training human beings, but you're trying to improve running times, and you're trying to improve human beings. And that's, I think, one of the biggest things is having athletes leave your program that are in a group text with you 5 years later and don't hate your guts, and they're just like, nah, like I learned a lot, not just about running, but I learned a lot about life in this program, and how to persevere and overcome when things are difficult, and how to be a good teammate, and how to work with other individuals, and everything that comes with it.
So, yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that's the biggest deal. I think winning a secondary, I think that kind of takes care of itself. But teaching a kid how to reach their full potential from wherever they came from to when they leave. To me, that's the big deal. And I think those kids that feel like that happened, they're the ones that, they're always around. They love it. They eat it up. They feel like it was a valuable part of their lives. And, that's how we end up going to like a lot of weddings and baby showers and stuff, because I laughed, you coached with me, and then two kids that we coached moved to Colorado, and, you end up like having dinner with their family or whatever.
I'm fixing to leave and go pick up their dog to dog sit for a few days. So as we speak.
And so it's like, yeah, like if it's really like this, lifelong process that we're trying to do as coaches and trying to teach them as athletes, then yeah, that's what you get. You get to dog sit a kid who graduated 15 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so and that's what really makes it kind of worth it and stuff. So, but yeah, I mean, I would think that if anybody listening to this could kind of follow those trends for starting off the base building and the direction they want to go with that. I think we could look at a lot of people having a lot of success, depending on how they define that, 3 or 4 months down the road.
Yeah. And if you are listening to this and you're, going, this sounds great, I don't really know where to start, shoot us an email, get on social media. We have our podcast on YouTube. We also have the website, legacytrackclub.com. We're on Facebook. We're on Instagram. We coach individual athletes, but we also coach teams as well. So we put together some custom summer training plans for a few teams, and we would love to, sit down via, video call with you and kind of walk you through that process and help you craft a plan that you can take back to your high school team or middle school team. Hey, college team, maybe you got somebody went on medical leave and you got roped in. But we'd love to help you out. Be sure to check out the Legacy Track Club on all our social media and the website. And just come by, and if nothing else, drop us a line and let us know how we're doing and what you think of what we said, whether you agree or disagree. We love a little bit of discourse.
That's right.
We're happy to debate any day of the week. So, well, Coach Falting, thank you so much for your time and insight today, and we'll be a little bit more regular with this now that it's summer and we got a little bit more time on our hands.
That's right. We're going to build this thing back up. Again, like the COVID days, we were dropping these weekly.
That's it.
And so, just like COVID taught us a lot about training, it allowed us to talk a whole lot about running. So hopefully this summer we'll get back to that.
Yeah, well, we've never had an issue with that. That's for sure. All right, everybody. We'll catch you next time. Thank you so much.
Bye.